With a steady drumming of mighty diesel engines, an eastbound Montana rail link triumphantly pulls its tonnage over the apex of a mountain pass, just as trains before it have done for 140 years. But this is a railroad in twilight. Since its beginning in 1987, Montana Rail Link has built an incredible following among the railfan community. Its popularity may be attributed to the railroad's beautiful setting in the Big Sky Country, or its impressive fleet of EMD locomotives. More likely, it is because the Montana Rail Link is unique. Out west, rail fans have basically two choices when it comes to railroads. One is orange, the other is yellow. As the once numerous fallen flags faded into either of those two colors, the black and blue paint scheme adopted by the Washington Company stood out as something different. At least for a while. In early 2022, MRL announced it had reached an agreement with BNSF for an early termination of its 60-year lease of former Northern Pacific track in Montana. Since that time, 7 Idea Productions, along with thousands of other rail fans, have journeyed to Montana for one final look at this beloved regional railroad. This is the final episode of our 4-part series and focuses on MRL's second subdivision between Logan and Sprawling, wrapping up at Laurel Yard, just west of Billings. Trains race through the Gallatin Valley to Bozeman. Negotiate the steep grades of Bozeman Pass with manned helpers out of Livingston. And roll along the scenic Yellowstone River to MRL's busy yard at Laurel. Shot between February of 2022 and June 2023, this is our final salute to one of our favorite railroads. Farewell, MRL, Part 4. Today's journey over the Montana Rail Link will focus on the eastern portion of the railroad, covering most of the second and part of the first subdivision. Our starting point is Logan, milepost 164.6. This is the historic junction where Northern Pacific's Helena route via Mullen Pass meets their Butte line over Homestake Pass, part of which is still utilized by MRL. From here, the single-track main line heads east through the fertile Gallatin Valley, passing the sidings of Manhattan and Belgrade before arriving at Bozeman. A small yard exists here, which is switched by a local throughout the week. Heavy eastbounds often stop in Bozeman to take on helpers for the climb over Bozeman Pass. The grade up the west slope of the pass is 1.8% and starts as soon as the railroad enters Rocky Canyon. After passing the siding of West End, trains crest the summit of Bozeman Pass and plunge into the 3,015-foot bore of Bozeman Tunnel. The east portal opens to the siding of Muir as a line drops down a 1.9% grade to Livingston. This is the helper base for Bozeman Pass, and MRL utilizes the old Northern Pacific steam and diesel shops for locomotive and car maintenance. At one time, Livingston was considered the gateway to Yellowstone National Park, with Northern Pacific's Park Branch heading south to Gardner Station. Passengers would detrain in Gardner and take a stagecoach into the park. The line opened in 1883 and operated until 1948. By then, automobiles had become the preferred mode of transportation, and the line was closed in 1954. East of Livingston, the second subdivision crosses the Yellowstone River and continues on a water-level course passing Mission, Elton, Kearney, Big Timber, Greycliff, Quebec, and Reed Point, where it crosses back to the river's north bank. It then continues through Craver, Columbus, and Rapids. At Sprawling, trains enter the first subdivision and the busy Laurel Yard, where we will wrap up our tour. It is with a twinge of regret that we begin what we know to be our last picture on the MRL. We find ourselves along the Yellowstone River on a sultry July afternoon. Smoke from a forest fire south of Butte, some 60 miles to the west, has blown in, carried on a hot summer breeze. This is Logan, milepost 164.6 on MRL's second subdivision between Helena and Sprawling. It is also the junction with the former Butte line over Homestake Pass, which today is the fifth subdivision running west as far as Pipestone. MRL 403 and 250 power the 844 local as it returns to Logan after servicing customers in Three Forks and Sappington. The local works weekdays out of Logan. Before it can finish its work and tie up for the day, it'll have to wait for a Laurel to Missoula train which has stopped to do some switching on its westbound trip. The train is symboled the MLAU-MIS per BNSF's method of train identification, although railroaders and rail fans refer to it by an old two-letter symbol held over from the BN years, the LM. With this evening's switching done at Logan, the LM continues west on the second sub for Lombard Canyon. By nightfall, it will reach the summit of Winston Hill and drop down toward Montana's capital city. Logan was named for Captain William Logan, a homesteader from whom the town was purchased and established in 1889. With the building of NP's second main line over Homestake Pass in that year, Logan became an important station for its size, with a 6-stall roundhouse and coal and watering facilities for steam locomotives. Like many railroad stations before telephones and radios, Logan had a telegraph office for relaying information. The call letters for Logan were CH, Charlie Hotel. The line to Helena and over Mullen Pass became NP's preferred freight route, while the Scenic Butte line over Homestake Pass was utilized by the famous North Coast Limited, and later Amtrak's North Coast Hiawatha until being discontinued in 1979. The rails over Homestake have been inactive since 1983, and some speculate the BNSF could reopen the pass after their takeover of the Montana Rail Link is complete. Although unlikely, only time will tell. In the meantime, there is still activity on the fifth sub. In addition to the 844 local, rock trains like this MRL BAL load at Pipestone and can be seen quite regularly during the summer months. The Gallatin River flows through Cottonwood Gulch below the Horseshoe Hills, running north of the Gallatin Valley. With all the industry in the area, the small yard at Logan remains busy throughout the week. Standard power for the 844 local is a GP35 and SD40-2. Also calling on Logan is the 841, or the Bozeman local, powered by another GP35 and SD40-2XR. The 405 was built in January of 1965 for the Denver and Rio Grande Western as number 3407. The 252 is a former Union Pacific SD40 built in April of 1966 as UP3024. It was later upgraded to Dash 2 standards by Montana Rail Link and designated an SD40-2XR. MRL 251 and 403 pull a string of hoppers from the Trident cement plant located near the headwaters of the Missouri. The 252 makes another appearance, this time powering the Jimbo train on a brief jaunt that'll take it down the 5th subdivision. In addition to the Jimbo, this work train has a locomotive crane and tender. On Friday afternoons, the Logan Power is added to the Bozeman local for its return trip east. All 4 units will be taken to Livingston for servicing over the weekend. Today's train is exceptionally long, making for a great show of 2-stroke EMD goodness. Added to this consist are around 3,000 feet of vintage twin-stack container cars that are going for scrap. The previous day, we saw the Logan local pulling these cars out of storage near Whitehall. On another Friday in June of 2023, the scene is repeated. The next sighting east of Logan is fairly short at 3,574 feet. The nearby town dates back to 1865 and was originally named Hamilton, then Moreland in 1883, and renamed again for a malting company sometime later called Manhattan. MRL 4304 leads an eastbound Missoula to Laurel train toward Bozeman, where it'll pick up helpers for the climb over Bozeman Pass. Spools of fiber optic cable tell of the work going on to upgrade the railroad to positive train control, something MRL has been working on since before the BNSF takeover was in the works. The last station before reaching Bozeman is Belgrade at milepost 149.9. The railroad serves customers on both sides of the main line, including these facilities for Nutrien Ag Solutions on the north. Nutrien Ag provides seed for area farmers in Montana, including winter and spring wheat, durum, and canola. The facility seems rather quiet on this January day in 2023, but so does the railroad. There are several trains on the main line, but all of them have been parked for most of the day after an early morning service disruption at Bozeman. A semi-truck was involved in a fatal crash after it skidded off the I-90 overpass and landed on the MRL main line. The accident happened just before 4 a.m. It is now late in the afternoon, and the logjam is about to break. The The first indication is the arrival of the Bozeman and Logan power. You guessed it, it's Friday, and these engines are heading to the Livingston Roundhouse for weekend servicing. If you were wondering where their train is, they're being called on for helper service over Bozeman Pass. And this is their train.
James, let me know when everybody's on, I'll kick the air off. And everybody's on. Okay, release. Release. Okay, we got a clear block, moving ahead.
This eastbound Missoula to Laurel has been tied down all day at Belgrade. The original plan was to take on helpers at Bozeman. Based in Livingston, the helpers were en route to meet the LM when the accident occurred. With a new crew and a couple of 4-axle GP35s pushing on the rear, the train resumes its eastbound move. The GP35s smoke it up as the manifest begins to pick up speed. Only the first two engines are under load. MRL 401 and 259 are both offline, and essentially extra dead weight, which will make tonight's climb over Bozeman Pass a little more interesting. The second subdivision ducks under Interstate 90, arriving at the west end of Bozeman, still guarded by searchlights from the Northern Pacific era. The 841 local arrives on a springtime afternoon in 2022. A couple of months later, we catch the ML at the same location. The derelict Bozeman station sits quietly along the main line. It was built in 1892, replacing the original wood building from 1883, which caught fire from a passing steam engine. That is why this depot is made of brick. In addition to passenger service, the station served as the northern terminus of the city's electrical streetcar system between 1892 and 1921. Closed at the end of Amtrak service in 1979, it remains empty with an uncertain future. There is one thing certain about the future of Bozeman, and you can both see it and hear it. It's growing. The sound of hammers ring through the cool winter air just south of Bozeman Yard, a college town named for pioneer John Bozeman, who along with Jim Bridger led settlers through the mountains and into the Gallatin Valley in 1863. His route became known as the Bozeman Trail, and today it is traversed by an interstate and the railroad. A little while ago, we saw the ML train departing Belgrade with helpers on the rear. We have turned back the clock a few hours to see the Bozeman local beginning its day's work. It'll do some switching here before heading west to Logan. The highway overpass in the distance is where this morning's tragic accident occurred. Fortunately, no trains were passing underneath the freeway at that moment, although it was said that the helpers for the ML were getting close, but were able to be stopped in time. The MRL Missoula dispatcher has hung a green on the old Northern Pacific signal at West Bozeman for the 841 local to proceed on the main. It's going to be a long day for both the 841 and 844 locals, although they don't know it yet. We will be seeing them again, but in the meantime, let's continue east. Returning on a much warmer day in July, MRL 4319 and 4305 power an ML through East Bozeman. This is normally where eastbound trains add helpers for Bozeman Pass. However, today's Missoula to Laurel is light enough for the pair of aces to handle this on their own. Earlier in the day, that was not the case. MRL 4406 slowly rolls eastward after stopping to take on helpers. This train looks like another ML, but is actually a Garrison to Laurel train. Garrison is located on the 3rd subdivision between Helena and Missoula at the junction of the old Butte line, operated by BNSF. The LM and ML trains normally handle interchange traffic, but sometimes an extra train is needed, like today's Garrison to Laurel. A set of Livingston helpers shove on the rear of the train. A train we'll be seeing a lot of is the MLAU-LAU, also known as the Laurel to Bozeman to Laurel, or simply the Bozeman Bullet. The train began running in 2019, and today is powered by a Heritage unit number 4404. This train runs in the evenings on weekdays, making a straight shot from Laurel Yard to Bozeman. After dropping its train, it usually runs light back to Livingston for some work before returning to Laurel. The engines roll along a field of wheat where once stood Fort Ellis. Established by the War Department in 1863, Fort Ellis was an important post during the Indian Wars of the 19th century. It also served as a base for exploring a region that we know today as Yellowstone National Park. The fort was decommissioned and abandoned in August of 1886, 3 years after the arrival of the Northern Pacific. Just beyond the former Fort Ellis, the railroad heads along Rocky Creek on a course running between the Bridger and Gallatin mountain ranges, the western approach to Bozeman Pass. It's the 22nd day of January 2023, and a light snow falls as MRL 4302 leads the LM train into the Gallatin Valley. The ruling grade on the west side of Bozeman Pass is 1.9%. Crossing gates activate at Trail Creek Road as our ML train with the Bozeman and Laurel helpers stomp up the hill below Interstate 90. Another Missoula to Laurel heads through the same crossing on a soggy afternoon in June of 2023. This train is aided by a Livingston helper set, including the MRL 290, the railroad's only SDP 40, officially designated as an SDP 40-2XR. The rocky bluffs of the Gallatin Range tower above the main line as MRL 4304 leads another ML on the ascent through Rocky Canyon. A trio of ACES service helpers including 4402, 4307, and 4401. The siding west of Bozeman Tunnel is simply called West End. It is 9,352 feet in length. We get another look at the Garrison to Laurel train. The elevation of Bozeman Pass is 5,565 feet at the apex. Not incredibly high as mountain passes go, but on a day like today, it seems like the top of the world. BNSF 7732 heads east with a mixed manifest and intermodal train. The train has distributed power, but the lone GE ES44C4 on the rear is not enough for the ruling grade of Bozeman Pass. The Livingston set with a 290 is shoving on the C4's rear drawbar. The east switch of West End sits just outside of a deep cut, in which is the summit of the pass and the west portal of the Bozeman Tunnel. It's the 20th of July 2022, and the Bozeman Bullet is crawling over the summit with its short train. As the train starts down the west slope of the pass on this warm summer evening, let's move the calendar ahead 6 months without moving an inch. Our ML train with the Bozeman helpers slowly approaches the east switch, and an untimely red signal brings it to a stop just short of the summit. Earlier, we mentioned a logjam due to the service disruption, and right now there are 2 westbounds climbing the grade out of Livingston. The first is a grain train, which as we speak is holding the main at Muir on the east side of the tunnel. This train should have had a yellow, which would have allowed it to continue over the apex. Per operating rules, the engineer brings his train to a stop. He then receives permission from the dispatcher to pass the signal displaying stop indication and proceed east. Or tries to. Right now, the engineer is probably wishing he had more than just 2 little GP35s for helpers, as he tries to overcome gravity on the stiff 1.9% grade without breaking the train in 2. With sand coating the rails, the 3 big aces dig in and finally find their footing, each capable of producing up to 191,000 pounds of tractive effort at startup. The Bozeman local power featuring MRL 403 and 404 give it all they've got as they near the top of the pass. The additional rated power axles of both the 401 and 259 would have exceeded the legal limit for this train's makeup. All three Jeeps could have been used, but the crew is unable to isolate 259. The result was more dead weight for the other two engines to pull. The following Sunday afternoon, we caught the power returning west behind a Livingston helper set. It's back to Bozeman for another week's work on the MRL. We are at the same location in June of 2023 as another Missoula to Laurel train climbs toward the summit of Bozeman Pass. Above the train, we can see the remaining bore of the original tunnel under Bozeman Pass, which was completed in 1884. It was called the Muir Tunnel, named for James Muir, who was a contractor on the project. The tunnel was 3,610 feet in length and at an elevation of 5,565 feet, making it 17 feet higher than the Mullen Tunnel. Muir Tunnel saw use for the next 50 years, but the increasing size of trains and locomotives created the need for more clearance. So, a new tunnel was built. Muir Tunnel saw its last train on the morning of July 28, 1945. By the afternoon of that same day, Northern Pacific trains began using the new Bozeman Tunnel. And nearly 80 years later, trains still do. The new bore is 595 feet shorter and slightly lower in elevation, with a summit just west of the West Portal. MRL 4319 leads another ML train over the top of Bozeman Pass. The Bozeman local exits the tunnel with cars from Livingston. The Bozeman Bullet makes its final climb to the summit on a gentle 0.6% grade. East of Bozeman Tunnel, the ruling grade is 1.8%, and most westbounds use helpers. This is the typical Livingston helper set, 2 aces with an SD40-2XR in the middle. The helpers use a quick disconnect system to cut off their train on the fly, which they often do right here at Muir. If the westbound needs additional dynamic braking or there is an eastbound that needs a shove, the helpers will stay on the train to Bozeman. This crew gets to head back to Livingston to tie up or to help the next westbound. Muir was the site of a camp during the construction of the first tunnel over Bozeman Pass. Today, it's an 8,685-foot siding that often gets plugged with trains, waiting their turn through the tunnel. After stopping for the red signal at West End, our ML train slowly makes its way out of the tunnel and into the siding. A westbound BNSF grain shuttle waits on the main. It sounds like one of the helpers has developed an air leak. At least it's all downhill from here to the roundhouse. The Missoula East dispatcher bends iron at West Muir, and the grain shuttle gets a clear through the tunnel. Helpers meet helpers on this cool winter's evening as MRL 4401, 255, and 4400 assist the grainer over the top. The local helpers detach from the ML. The plan was to run back to Bozeman and tie up. First, they wait for the next westbound, which appears to be tonight's LM. The second engine is the Heritage unit, which has been eluding us thus far, MRL 4407, which pays tribute to our nation's veterans. The Bozeman Locals crew has been dealing with that air leak that we noticed, and they haven't had much luck. The decision was made to follow the ML down the hill to the Livingston roundhouse and have the crew shuttle meet them there. It's another meeting of the helpers on this busy night on Bozeman Pass. The Missoula dispatcher commented on all the MRL trains she was working with at Muir: the LM, ML, and 3 helper sets. This was definitely the place to be tonight. Gray clouds swollen with rain greet us on the east end of Muir, while another MLAU LAU heads for the top of Bozeman Pass. MRL 355, the railroad's last operational SD45 is on the point, with SD40-2XR number 263 lending a hand. Almost exactly 1 year earlier, photographer Kristen Schultz caught the same train powered by another 240s, the 255 and 250. A railroad simply delivers goods from point A to point B. It is expected regardless of the time of year and the weather. Maybe that is why we are intrigued by scenes like this Laurel to Missoula, battling the 1.8% grade of Bozeman Pass in a January snowstorm. Track laying on Northern Pacific's Montana Division over Bozeman Pass commenced during the winter of 1882 and 83, save a few spells of extremely cold weather. Laborers had to contend with shoveling snow off the ground before going to work on the grade. Laying a temporary grade over the top of the pass before the first tunnel was finished, they were able to reach Bozeman on the 14th day of March, 1883. Helpers 4401, 4400, and SD40-2XR number 255 keep these steel wheels moving westward, away from the Yellowstone River. The snow has let up and it's turned bitter cold as BNSF 6952 leads a heavy Powder River Basin coal train up Bozeman Pass to the tune of 4-stroke GEs. The MRL helpers add their pulsing two-stroke beat to the ensemble. On July 15, 1806, Sacagawea led Captain William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition eastward over the pass in a quest to explore the Yellowstone River to its mouth. 216 years and 7 days later, here we stand as a westbound grain train follows the historic crossing. KCS 4088 shoves the train by remote control with the assistance of MRL 4403, 290, and 4400. A track inspector follows the train up the hill, where an eastbound is waiting in the hole at Muir. After about 30 minutes, MRL 4406 heads down grade on the point of the Garrison to Laurel we last saw at West End. Set up near the same crossing in the evening, MRL 4404 leads the Bozeman Bullet uphill. The train departs Laurel on weekdays just after 4 p.m., making for daylight runs over Bozeman Pass during the late spring and summer months. The 355 leads the train westward in May of 2023. With the Absaroka Mountains for a backdrop, the same power runs light out of Livingston. We again catch the Bozeman Bullet heading west into the evening sun. Our goal of filming was to document MRL power wherever and whenever we could. This westbound move on a Sunday afternoon in January of 2023 makes for a good rolling roster shot of the Livingston helpers leading the Bozeman and Logan power after a week in servicing. MRL 4304 leads an ML train down grade above Livingston. We get our first look at Livingston in the wee hours of the morning on January 22, 2023. An LM train has stopped to pick up helpers and SD40-2 number 250 before tackling the grade of Bozeman Pass. The train passes the classic Northern Pacific Depot. There isn't any snow on the ground, but a bitter wind blows down from the mountains as MRL 4302 slowly makes its way toward Bozeman Pass. The helpers get a good workout as the mountain grade begins just as soon as the train departs Livingston. A nighttime ML glides into Livingston. Like many dots along the railroad map, Livingston has that look of an American small town in simpler times. Located just west of the railroad's crossing of the Yellowstone River at the base of Bozeman Pass, it's not surprising that the town owes its existence to the Northern Pacific. In 1872, an old fisherman named Amos Benson built a log cabin along the bank of the Yellowstone. Soon he had a ferry and a trading post called Benson's Landing. Within a decade, a survey crew for Northern Pacific set up camp on the opposite side of the river while they looked for a more permanent dwelling. They found it on July 16, 1882. It became known as Clark City, after Herman Clark, principal contractor for the NP. It was a good name, until it was discovered the railroad had already picked a town site here with the name Livingston. As a solution, Livingston was built a short distance away from Clark City, and Clark City residents moved. The end of one town was the beginning of another, and Livingston was incorporated on December 21, 1882. The 1902-built Livingston Depot served the Northern Pacific Main Line passengers as well as visitors traveling the railroad's Park Branch to Yellowstone National Park. Besides being a passenger station, this served as headquarters for NP's Rocky Mountain Division, which territory stretches west to Missoula. This was a strategic location at the base of Bozeman Pass, where helpers are necessary to assist westbound trains on the mountain grade that begins almost immediately after leaving town. In addition to helper operations, Livingston became Northern Pacific's primary steam and diesel shop in the west. The 90-acre complex included machine shops, turntable, roundhouse, and a powerhouse. Burlington Northern closed the facility in 1986, but it was reopened in 1988 by Montana Rail Link. The Livingston Rebuild Center purchased a portion of the facility for contract work involving repair and remanufacturing of locomotives and rail cars. MRL also used the facility for running repairs of its engine fleet. LRC was a busy place in the 1990s. The nearby mountain grade of Bozeman Pass made it a perfect test environment for newly refurbished engines. The Rebuild Center was sold to Talgo LRC in the year 2000 and then to MRL in 2006. Today, it is still used for locomotive maintenance, and we can see the Bozeman and Logan power taking a weekend breather, along with a helper set in between runs. On a lazy Saturday morning, the quiet town is interrupted by an eastbound BNSF stack train which has just crossed Bozeman Pass. The crew can now look forward to miles of easy running along the Yellowstone River. A westbound BNSF coal train has just taken on helpers and departs for Bozeman Pass. The train passes the old Park Branch Junction, just west of the depot. It has been reduced to a stub track about a mile in length that served the RY Timber Sawmill in Livingston. It closed in early 2023 after a structure fire. The railroad saw a dramatic increase in rail fans during the spring and summer of 2022, as no one at that time knew exactly when the end would come. There is an old proverb that rail fan photographers live by, and that is, shoot it while you can, for tomorrow it'll be gone. The helpers are already working hard as the train leaves town. At the east end of Livingston, south of the main line, we find radio station KPRK. It was one of the first radio stations to sign on the air after World War II. The futuristic Art Modern style building depicted the bright outlook the community had when KPRK went on the air for the first time on January 9, 1947. Although this classic facility is now closed, the station is still on the air with programming originating from studios in Bozeman. Stepping across the main line from the radio station, we are in time to catch this evening's Bozeman Bullet, crossing the Yellowstone River at milepost 113 under a moody sky. Continuing east of Livingston, trains roll over the former Yellowstone Division, which continued east to Miles City. Remnants of an old branch line head north of the main and over the Yellowstone River just east of Livingston at Mission. This was the Shields River branch, which ran for 22 miles, serving agricultural communities of Grannis, Clyde Park, and Wissall. The line was closed in 1985 by the BN, and flooding in recent years has taken out this bridge, which remains in a state of disrepair. Proof that the railroad and the river don't always get along. Still, it is the river that leads the railroad eastward toward our final destination of Laurel Yard. A westbound Bozeman Bullet enjoys fast running on the water level route. Two Aces Power and ML past milepost 99. The Yellowstone runs a course of 700 miles from its headwaters on the Continental Divide in northwestern Wyoming to a meeting of the Missouri in North Dakota. This section of the river and the railroad is popular with photographers and is often referred to as Springdale Curve. On the railroad, it is called Curve 99 and is part of a line relocation during the construction of I-90 in the 1960s. The Northern Pacific benefited from the relocation with gentler, higher-speed curves, something that is lost on tonight's Bozeman train. The dispatcher got a report of a person on the tracks near here, so the crew is proceeding with caution. MRL 4306 leads the ML train eastward past milepost 96 between Elton and Kearney. Builders of the Northern Pacific Main Line described the country east of Livingston as a beautiful valley that admirably serves the route of the railroad for the next 340 miles to Glendive. That still holds true over 130 years later. A Missoula to Laurel train approaches Big Timber. This train is following the eastbound Garrison to Laurel we saw earlier at Bozeman Pass. It picked up 2 additional aces at Livingston before continuing east. We catch up to the train at Big Timber. Situated in south-central Montana, Big Timber got its name from the nearby Big Timber Creek, so named by William Clark in 1806 because of large cottonwood trees he found there. The town's original name was Dornix, and the small community thrived around a sawmill. In 1880, 2 Irishmen, Charles McDonald and Edward Vesey, drove 3,000 head of sheep from California, thus starting a long tradition of sheep and cattle ranching in the area. A post office was established that same year, and it became a Northern Pacific stop in 1883 with the name Big Timber. Today, Big Timber is a 9,306-foot siding and base for maintenance of way between Livingston and Columbus. MRL 255 leads the Bozeman Bullet into the siding. The 4404 sprints west on the main, past the classic NP signal bridge and hut near the east switch. An office building for maintenance of way wears MRL's white and blue trim, just east of the siding. MRL 4406 leads our garrison to Laurel east on a bright sunny morning. By the afternoon, the sky has made a dramatic change, bringing some relief to the day's heat, yet darkening our westbound subject at Greycliff. The railroad continues east of Greycliff, past a former station of Quebec, which today is a 9,093-foot siding. It was this excavator that made us stop. The old western town of Reed Point is our next distraction, named for pioneer Harry Reed, who ran a stage station here for several years. Just down the street from the Waterhole Saloon is the railroad crossing. MRL 255 is westbound in May of 2022. On the railroad, Reed Point is a 9,400-foot siding at milepost 56.9. Another afternoon Bozeman Bullet heads west. East of Reed Point, near milepost 51, the railroad crosses the Yellowstone on a 3-span through-truss bridge. In June of 2023, this bridge collapsed under a Laurel to Missoula train, shutting down the railroad for a good part of the summer. Although we weren't there to cover the accident or repair, we can show you what the bridge looked like from our visit in 2011. Evidence of spring flooding can be found in the form of this cottonwood tree, which has taken a temporary residence here. The paralleling road bridge was removed in the years following this scene of a BNSF empty coal train heading eastbound for Laurel. A 91-car LM led by MRL 262, 382, and 258 crossed the Reed Point Bridge in July of 2011. This scene originally appeared in our program MRL Montana Mainline, Part 1. From the shoulder of a cliff called Benson's Bluff, the railroad curves around the bend of the Yellowstone just west of Columbus. With Benson's Bluff in the background, an eastbound Pasco to Laurel rolls through Columbus behind BNSF 9025. The rear of the train works through a reverse S-curve as it approaches the old Columbus Depot and siding. This image better illustrates the curve. MRL 4304 leads an ML train through Columbus. Columbus started life as a stagecoach station, but it took a few tries to get the name right. First, it was called Eagle's Nest, then Sheep Dip, but for some reason, not everyone cottoned to that name, so Sheep Dip became Stillwater instead. This, however, caused confusion and delay on the Northern Pacific, since the railroad already had a Stillwater station in Minnesota, and freight was often routed to the wrong place. Finally, the consensus was on Columbus, and so it is today. It would have been interesting to see a Northern Pacific station named Sheep Dip, but probably not if you have to live here. MRL 4319 East highballs Columbus. The second subdivision continues its lazy eastward course through the Yellowstone River Valley to Sprawling, just west of Laurel. At 220.7 miles in length between Helena and Sprawling, it is the longest on the MRL. We showed you this MLAU-LAU in reverse order as we chased it west of Laurel. The train approaches milepost 36 on a flashing yellow east of Columbus. We have showed you this train several times now, and while we roll our camera yet again, we remember that proverb mentioned earlier, the one that goes, "Shoot it while you can." The evening Bozeman bullet was suspended after the Reed Point Bridge collapse in June of 2023. When the railroad reopened later in the summer, the bullet was replaced with a Laurel to Helena job that has a less predictable schedule. Powered by two SD-70 Aces, it may easily be confused with MRL's system-wide manifest. As they say, change is the only constant on the railroad. Great cliffs of sandstone rise out of the Yellowstone River Valley between Rapids and Park City, near the eastern end of the second subdivision. Our Bozeman bullet is not long out of Laurel as it passes mile marker 29. Park City is an industrial spur track located at milepost 22.4. BNSF 6376 heads east on a dark winter afternoon. A caboose tells us we have made it to the eastern point of our tour of the Montana Rail Link. This westbound BNSF oil train is tied down at the west end of what turns out to be the largest rail yard in the state of Montana. To appreciate Laurel Yard, we need to take to the air. Extending for 2.5 miles from the center of town to the old Highway 10 overpass, Laurel Yard is not only the largest in the state, but also the busiest, being a junction of 3 historic railroads. Northern Pacific's route was joined by the CB&Q line running north from Casper, Wyoming, and Great Northern running south from Great Falls, Montana. In 1970, all those roads became BN. Along the south end of the yard is a rail welding plant, where both new and used jointed rail is welded into ribbon rail. 80-foot sections of track or sticks are fused together into continuously welded rail. The new sections are nearly 1/3 of a mile in length. This facility is one of 3 owned by BNSF. The other 2 are located in Pueblo, Colorado, and Springfield, Missouri. BNSF trains enter the Montana Rail Link at Jones Junction, around 30 miles to the east. Between these 2 points is the city of Billings, which is barely visible near the horizon. As we continue toward the east end of the yard, we can see Interstate 90, which follows the first subdivision into the city of Billings. Near the west end of the yard, we find a turntable and locomotive fueling facility, where both BNSF and MRL power are inspected and provided with fuel, sand, lube oil, and drinking water. During the busy years, it is estimated that over 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel are pumped into locomotives during a 24-hour period. BNSF trains are handed off to Montana Rail Link for switching and handling between here and Spokane, Washington, as part of the original 60-year lease agreement, which was set to expire in the year 2047. The yard is flat-switched with 30 classification tracks, 15 for westbound and 15 for east. Besides mainline traffic, MRL serves a plethora of industry around Laurel and Billings with their small army of classic EMDs. Southwest of the yard is the CHS Laurel Refinery, which dates back to 1930 after the discovery of the Oregon Basin oil field in Wyoming. This location was chosen for a refinery because of the access to the NP, CB&Q, and GN railroads. Today, a chop-nosed GP9 number 118 switches the refinery, which produces gasoline and diesel fuel. At the east end of Laurel, another GP9 number 131 switches a cut of cars. Laurel's beginnings go back to 1806, when Captain William Clark camped at the mouth of the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone River. The campsite slowly became the town of Carlton. The name was changed to Laurel after the arrival of the Northern Pacific, and the town was slowly moved away from the river's edge to its current location. A classic Northern Pacific signal bridge still guards the control point at Shiloh, milepost 11.5 on MRL's first subdivision. The entire sub is only 33.6 miles in length from Jones Junction to Sprawling, but sees a lot of activity, keeping the Missoula East dispatcher busy. MRL 257 and 253 are returning to Laurel from Billings with quite an assortment of cars on the 21st day of January 2023. At the time of this production, the date for the BNSF takeover of its former Northern Pacific Main Line had been set for New Year's Day 2024. At that time, MRL will discontinue service and BNSF will begin operating on its new MRL division, named in honor of Dennis Washington's railroad. BNSF has pledged to retain all of MRL's 1,200 employees in their current jobs. But for rail fans the world over, this classic regional railroad will be sorely missed. At a time in American railroading where variety has given way to monotony, the MRL gave us something different. It was modern, yet nostalgic, high-tech, yet classy, with a heart that beat to the rhythm of two-stroke EMD prime movers. Farewell, MRL. Thanks for the memories.